Welcome to Cover, where we're diving inside the pages of The Advocate magazine. Our Advocate cover star is an out Cuban-American and co-anchor of Good Morning America Weekend, Gio Benitez, who is infusing a fresh new attitude into mainstream journalism. We have behind-the-scenes footage and interviews of Gio to come. In our cover feature, Gio opens up to senior national reporter Christopher Wiggins about the power of representation. And joining me now is the man himself, Christopher Wiggins, to tell us more about the Gio generation. Hello, Christopher. Thank you for joining me. So you had the opportunity. Hi, always a pleasure. So you had the opportunity to sit down with Gio for the Advocate's new cover story. What did you talk about?
Well, we started the conversation on just kind of a really friendly note. He called me and picked up the conversation like we were old friends. We've communicated several times on Twitter, through DMs. We have some friends in common, but we had never spoken before. So, it was really great to have the opportunity to converse with him, and we discussed, him reaching the top of his career with his new promotion at Good Morning America. We talked a little bit about him growing up in Miami. We talked a little bit about the stories that he's covered in the past, and things that he looks forward to doing in the future. And we just discussed, the importance of being authentic. But that's one of the things that was really important for him to convey to me in our conversation.
Yeah, speaking of that, one of the themes of the story is Gio's authenticity. Can you elaborate on that and why you chose to focus on that in the article?
Yeah, so as I said, the conversation with him was really easygoing, and that's not often that you have that with someone that you're interviewing. And so I wanted to, dive a little bit into getting to know him. And, when speaking to him, you get the sense that he cares deeply about the topics that he covers. He is very knowledgeable and very invested in making sure that the audience understands what the messages are that he's trying to convey and the stories that he's trying to tell. And he said that in TV news, it's important for people to come across authentically because it's very difficult to hide any other way in the spotlight like that. And so, as someone who is in a high-profile position and an out gay man, it was important for him to live his truth, and he's had a lot of support at ABC News, which has led to this position now at Good Morning America on the weekends.
And it's great to have such a great Latino, queer, married man. We need a few more role models in the world to show us there is a way for us. Was there anything that you found surprising about Gio when you were talking to him?
It wasn't necessarily that it was surprising to me, but it was poignant. And that is the fact that he really gets involved in the stories that he covers. He recently was in Maui reporting on the terrible wildfires there. And he was in the press a little bit because during one of those reports, he had gotten teary eyed and kind of cried a little bit on camera and had to collect himself. And, there were headlines written about that. And, when that happened, I thought about the conversation we had had several days before then and how he was really someone who was genuine in the coverage that he provides and that he feels that human element when it comes to stories that he has access to and that he has the opportunity to tell the American people about.
And does Gio realize the positive impact he'll be having on Latino LGBTQ youth?
Yeah, he's a very humble person, and so I don't think that he would take credit for the amount of good that his representation is doing. But he did tell me that when he and his husband Tommy Daddario got engaged in Paris and then married, their photographs went very much viral, and people were reaching out to Gio and his husband, telling them about how much it meant to be represented and to see their love story so openly. And Gio also said that when he was at the Pulse nightclub shooting scene back in 2016, I'm sorry, he was touched by the stories that he was telling there. And of course, many of the victims there were gay men of Latino descent. And so, it was just really a coming full circle for him to, have had the opportunity to cover that story, to then be in Miami for the photo shoot for our cover, and to have heard the stories of young people who really look up to him.
Well, thank you, Christopher. Now, let's take a look at that behind-the-scenes footage where Gio tells us about his favorite stories to cover, family heritage, and more.
It means the world to me to be here in Miami doing this shoot because obviously I'm from Miami, this is where I grew up, and this is also where my grandparents came when they fled communist Cuba. And this country gave them so much hope, and now that country's name is in the show I co-anchor on Saturdays and Sundays, Good Morning America. And it is a show that has such a rich history in this country. It is part of the fabric of this nation, and I don't take that for granted. And I'm just so grateful that we're at a time when I can say I'm a out gay man and co-anchoring this incredible broadcast every single weekend. So my favorite stories to cover, we do these segments called Rise and Shines, and we also do segments where we're surprising folks in communities, and these are people who are just, they're living about their lives, but they're doing such amazing things in this country. So I love to just show up there, surprise them on live television, and show how the community rallies around them. And I think that's just so uplifting and important to do that, and to show what so many folks in this country are doing. Some of the most difficult stories, of course, are tragedies, and I remember covering the Pulse nightclub shooting, and that was an incredibly difficult story because obviously it touched close to home, and we were talking about all of these kids, for all intents and purposes, who were at this nightclub that night. And when I got there, I was able to interview one of the survivors, and that survivor was such a mentor to so many of the kids in that club. That survivor was not gay. That survivor was an ally, and he was in tears as if it was his own children who had died that night. And I'll never forget that. And I remember we did several live shows that night from Central Florida, and we had produced a special Live 2020. And I was there, and we had just finished our second story. I remember I hadn't let it all sink in at that point because we were just moving and doing the journalism and the work and the reporting. And I took off my mic, I took off my IFB, and I just went into a room and I let it all out, and I just bawled because it was such a tragedy that we were witnessing in this country, and it certainly wasn't the last, and it won't be the last, unfortunately. But those are absolutely the most difficult stories to cover.
Thanks for watching Cover to Cover. Subscribe on YouTube and Facebook. Download our Roku and Fire TV app. Take us with you on the go. Get the Advocate Channel app on your Apple or Android device. Thanks for watching Cover to Cover. I'm Stephen Walker.